such a beautiful day outside. I think the Miata is happy today. All right. So let's get into today's topic. So basically, when I was 16, I got my first ever job working at a Taco Bell for $12.50 an hour. I live in Illinois, to give a little reference for like a cost of living and all that. So obviously this was the minimum wage at the time, and frankly, I was excited even just to work. But today I'm gonna show exactly how you can use the exact same model I used to turn my fast food job into a engineering position within just a few years, and really just exponentially how to increase your income and to build wealth with that income. Well, the first thing I need to mention is that at 16, I essentially was living like I was broke. You know, I didn't just take the opportunity of living with my parents for granted. And you shouldn't either if you're in a similar situation, or even if you're just in a relatively low-cost apartment or something like that. What you really need to do is optimize your expenses to your absolute needs for the first part of your journey. What I mean by this is you need to get an emergency fund the first thing you do, because the worst thing you want to have happen is to be too scared to take new opportunities and new risks, because it might go wrong and you won't know if you could put food on the table or not. This is why knowing your expenses and your income is super important in the beginning. And although it doesn't necessarily in and of itself build wealth, it does give you a good starting point. So yes, you absolutely need to have a savings net, and in today's day and age, that might be anywhere from $10,000 to $20,000, sort of depending where you're at, which can be a lot, especially for minimum wage work. I have no clue why this Acura just stopped like that. Basically, this just means you're buying cheap food, cheap clothes, and just living on what you absolutely need in a healthy way, of course. So what this gives you is enough money to sort of be able to pivot and take risks that you otherwise wouldn't have, right? For example, I would have never invested in the stock market, especially not like things like trading, like swing trading, if I didn't have this safety net. However, this is not going to be the most important thing forever. In fact, it really becomes a lot less important when you realize that the minimum wage income is not going to be enough to build true wealth, and especially if you want to build true wealth quickly. Sure, if you start at 20 years old and invest maybe $200 a month for the rest of your life, you can end up with $2 million in the bank by the time you're 65. And that's great and all, but is that really what you want to do for your entire life? And that's a lot of people will say no to that, right? They want to know, how do I actually build wealth, not even faster, not even just more, but in a thing that I actually want to do. And this is where skills are far superior than simply your savings. So how exactly did I do this in my journey, and how can you apply this to yours? Well, the thing is, I was still in school at the time, which is perfect for, you know, connections and like opportunities such as this. However, you don't necessarily need to be in school for this to work. You just need to know people, and knowing people connected with the industry you want to get into, whether that be even lightly, could have an exponential ROI. So what do I mean by this? Well, I got into my engineering company at such a young age, 17 in fact, not because I was some, you know, senior level controls engineer, for example, right? I got in there because I was able to provide value for a good cost to them, right? So basically, they were getting more outputs for their input. So let me be more specific. I knew how to do things like CNC machining and conventional machining, along with a bunch of other machining techniques that are really important to a company's manufacturing process. However, hiring a full-time person for this job really is tough, because, you know, the wages aren't going to be great. However, I was willing and able to accept that. So I did a sort of slightly upturn / lateral move to get into this engineering company. And via this engineering company, I myself that I was a good employee in all areas of my realm. And since I'm currently in school for my engineering degree, I quickly got promoted to an engineering position. And you're gonna have to do this by simply just finding out what you're good at. And this is why that safety net is absolutely important. You wanna be absolutely certain that you can invest in yourself and that it's not gonna ruin the rest of your life. So how exactly did I know that engineering was the thing that I wanted to get into? Well, it was literally just simply from taking classes in my high school and watching YouTube videos online. And you can do similar. Maybe instead of a high school, it's an online course or it's a university. However, you just need to find what you're good at and the connections that will bring you closer to that role, right? I only got into that engineering company as a machinist because I had a machining teacher that knew someone in the company. If you're connected with people in the industry you want, they can be connected with companies that you might want to serve and garner more skills. And even if this is a more entrepreneurial endeavor, connections are going to even be more important, because how else are you going to get clients or find the best way for certain roles within your company? Building wealth with minimum wage essentially comes down to using minimum wage to escape the minimum wage matrix. Essentially, you just want to use the money that you're getting in the right way. You don't want to be spending it on bullshit. You need to be just simply saving and investing it, and that investing comes with investing into yourself so you can hopefully break out of that minimum wage sort of loop. So yes, it's possible to build wealth on minimum wage, and you can either do that by sticking with minimum wage for the long term, but it's going to be a lot slower, right? Like I said, $200 a month is going to, over 40 years, turn into $2 million, but that's over 40 years. However, you can also use this money that you're getting to basically leverage itself, to be able to have a safety net for yourself so that you could take opportunities. You just want to be able to take opportunities to either like volunteer your work or do it for a low wage and not be worried about just living, right? You want to be able to get high income skills, right? And be willing to sacrifice to maybe accept a lower wage at first, or just simply take time out of your day. And this is really important to wealth building, right? And really accelerating that process. This is how exactly I did it, and how my net worth has grown in a simple 3 or 4 years over what most people find hard to do within over 2 decades. So if this video was helpful to you at all, and I really hope it was, maybe it helped you guide your framework, or maybe if you have any questions or more specific things you want me to cover, make sure to drop a comment and make sure to leave a like on the video. Thank y'all so much for watching, and I'll see y'all in the next one. Peace.